Are you ready, ready?
Welcome to the Boom Room. I'm so happy that you chose to join us for another week. Having said that, let's recap last week's action. First up, G5 versus Whooping That Ass. Whooping That Ass, led by Big Ben and Travis Kelce, took care of business and beat G5, who it looks like for the second consecutive season is going to deprive the league of seeing Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Now on 2, Jabronis versus the Legends. The Legends' bad luck continued as Justin Jackson was injured before registering a point. The Jabronis didn't play much better, but they did what they had to do to escape with the victory. Nice job, Jabronis. Tough break, Legends. On 2, Machiavellians versus Arizona Ryan. This game came down to Laviska Shenault versus Christian Kirk. Give Machiavellians big kudos with maybe the play of the year by playing Christian Kirk, who went off for 25 points. Machiavellians has quietly tied for the lead in his division. That guy just keeps plugging. Arizona Ryan's disappointing season continues. It's getting late early. Now on 2, the Champs versus the Higher Power. The Higher Power, they were pumped for this game. He had the top 3 scoring receivers in fantasy football. We're not talking about that guy from San Francisco. Led by Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Chart. I can't help him, sorry. And led by Chart. What a performance. TNT just runs into the buzzsaws in these games. What can you do? Great game from the Higher Power. TNT will be okay. Now on 2, El Caginos versus Bread Inc. With TNT losing, El Caginos knew they had an opportunity to take over the best record in the league, and they did just that. Not only did they beat Bread Inc., it was a top 5 all-time winning margin in the Beat It Fantasy Football League. You ready for this? He beat them by 109 points. Woo! 66 points, Bread Inc. That's more like bread stinks. Man, nice job, Caginos. Right now, you sit in the catbird seat. Now on 2, the game of the week. The North, the Negro. Let's get it on. In a game that the North had to have, he did just that, taking care of business. Negro gave him a little scare on Thursday with Marquise Valdez-Scanlon. His quarterback picked up. Teddy Bridgewater had a pretty decent game, but unfortunately, Negro just doesn't have the horses to bring it home. Nice win, North. After the game, he could be heard saying, "Don't count us out just yet." And after last year's run, I think the North has earned that benefit. Y'all know what time it is. Getting analytical. Getting analytical. Getting analytical. Listen, we're going to get analytical with all the 5-5 teams. There are currently 6 teams that sit at 5-5. And 4 of those teams would make the playoffs if they started today. Let's break down these 5-5 teams and see who the computer likes. First up, Bread Inc. Bread Inc. is coming off probably one of the toughest stretches of games anybody's played in the league so far this year. He's played Jabronis. He lost. He played Caginos last week, lost. He plays TNT this week. And those are the only 3 teams currently with winning records in the Beat It Fantasy Football League. If he could pull off one of those games, it would greatly increase his odds of winning that division. But right now, he's lost the first 2 and he's playing TNT, so we see how that go. Including TNT, the record of his remaining schedule is 18-22. He does have Negro and Arizona Ryan left on his schedule, so the computer does like this team. The computer gives his team a 52% chance to win a division and a 48% chance to make the playoffs. We'll see. Up next, Machiavellians. The remaining schedule for this guy, 20-20. He has a tough game this week with Cajinos, but it gets balanced out next week by playing Negro. Last 2 games are against the Higher Power and Lincoln Legends. The computer says it's going to come down to his last game versus Lincoln Legends. He cannot lose the game against Negro, and if he can pull off the upset against Cajinos or the Higher Power, sets him up great. Right now, he sits at 49% chance to win his division, 42% chance to make the playoffs. Now on 2, the North. The North remaining scheduled of teams that he has to play have a record of 23-17. He plays whooping that ass, the Higher Power, Jabronis, and TNT. That's a tough closing kick. He catches a break this week. The computer likes him because whooping that ass doesn't have Travis Kelce or his kicker, who's been one of the best kickers in the league this year. The North, unfortunately, is only given a 38% chance to win his division and a 28% chance to make the playoffs. And that's really based on how tough his schedule is coming down the stretch. Hey, good luck, North. We seen you do it last year. Now on 2, whooping that ass. His remaining schedule, teams are 23-17. He plays the North this week, as we just talked about it. Unfortunately, he will be without his best player, Kelce. That hurts him. He plays Arizona Ryan next week, who will be without Stephon Diggs and Jimmy Graham. So that's kind of a little boost. And he actually plays Cajinos, which on paper is a tough game, but that's the week that Cajinos will be without Christian McCaffrey. These are things to take into account. Last game of the season, he plays Jabronis in a game that he's probably going to need. The computer gives this guy 50% chance to make the playoffs. The Cajinos not having McCaffrey was huge. If he goes 2-2, it should be enough to get in. We'll see. Now on 2, Lincoln Legends. The teams that they face coming up will have a combined record of 17-23. He gets Arizona Ryan this week, and what the computer is actually saying is somewhat of an elimination game. If he loses to Arizona Ryan, his playoff probability goes from 49% to 36%. If he beats Arizona Ryan, his probability goes from 49% to 62%. This is a huge game this week for Lincoln Legends. Bread Inc., which will be the following week. We'll see. It's a toss-up. He has G5 left on his schedule, finishes with Machiavellians. So that's why the Arizona Ryan game is huge. He really can get 3 out of these last 4. Losing to Ryan might be 2-2, and tiebreakers might not go his way. Now on to the last team on this list, the Higher Power. And I know y'all thinking, all right, that's the commission. He going to inflate the numbers. I ran it 3 times to make sure the numbers were correct. Basically, the computer said the Higher Power is going to duplicate what the North did last year. He's currently on a 4-game winning streak. He gets G5 this week without the Chiefs. He plays the North, Machiavellians. His last game is against Negro. The schedule that he faces, he has the easiest schedule. The teams are 15-25. The computer says he runs the table. Not only does he run the table, the computer says there's a good chance that he's going to end up with the 3rd best record. And if Cagino should slip, has a chance to run him down for the division. The computer loves the Higher Power. And quite frankly, looking at the schedule, what's not to love? Well, that's us getting analytical. Getting analytical. I can't wait to see how this plays out and update this next week with the new computer model. Thanks for your time. Now, let's get back to the much anticipated power rankings. There was a lot of upheaval in the league last year when the committee unveiled their first annual power rankings. We will show the power rankings every week. Sometimes we'll get in depth, sometimes we'll just show it. So without further ado, this week's power rankings, sponsored by the committee. The favorites, once again, it's still TNT. They sit on that hill all by themselves. We'll go to the contenders. And I know the first contender, and I know he's sitting home like, you gotta be kidding me. That's El Cajinos. Guys have the best record. and they feel as though they should be on top. But El Cajinos, if you want to be on top, I can go in the room, I can print out those standings, and I can send it to you, and then you'll be on top. That's not what we do here. It's not about the standings. It's about in-depth analytics and projections. Listen, you've done what you're supposed to do. You've taken care of business. However, the computer just doesn't like your team. It doesn't think you're strong enough. They respect your body of work, but it's Russell Wilson, McCaffrey is dinged up, and Keenan Allen, if we squint hard enough, we can sneak him into a tier 1 wide receiver. I'm not going to disrespect Keenan Allen's season. He's been great, and he's earned that. But after that, we look at your roster, and it's just... And if you contrast that to what TNT has been through, literally 3 losses, 200 points a game, 189-point game, 170-point game. And I believe if the schedules was flipped, if TNT had your schedule, he would be undefeated. But that's no knock against you. You only can play who you play. You're not a favorite, but you have a game on your schedule that could be wonders. Just saying. On to the other contenders. Jabroni's stays on the contender list. Guys, solid, great team. I wouldn't say he's flying under the radar as far as being talked about winning it all. But nice team and definitely a contender. Last week, Arizona Ron was on a contender list. If you recall, me and Whipping That Ass had extensive conversations about this team. He's gone. It's just too many losses. The roster just doesn't look as impressive as it did. He's going to look back at some bad losses. And for that, he's off the contenders list. And he's been replaced by, if you've been watching, you know, the higher power. The higher power is now a contender with a schedule that he should be favored in his last 4 games. With his wide receiver play, he now has reached that status of he has 4 players that can give you 30. And if that ain't a contender, then what is? Now let's drop down to the wild cards. We revamped it a little bit. There's only one wild card. Give you a second before we unveil it. That's right, the North. The North is the only wild card. Talented team. A lot of good players. Only thing, the computer won't make the North a contender because of the schedule. He has a tough schedule. He plays a lot of the contenders coming home. So it'll be interesting to see. If he can sneak into the playoffs, he may go from wild card to contender. But he's the only one on the contender list. Next level, we're going to change it to teams who could win a playoff game. All right. Let's start with Whipping That Ass. He could win a playoff game, but right now the computer and the committee says we don't see three wins in a row. Machiavellians. Let's give him some love. He went up from not having enough to now we can see this guy winning a playoff game. Unfortunately, we still don't think it's good enough. His team is good enough to win 3 in a row. On the Bread Inc., who last week was on the wild card line. 2 bad losses. Not 2 bad losses because he played 2 teams that I guess he should have lost to. But if you're going to be a wild card or a contender in this 3-game gauntlet, you got to find a way to win a game. And his scoring has just been steadily going down. And as I said last week, there's a fatal flaw with his roster that still hasn't been addressed. So because of that, he can't be no more than a guy that can win a playoff game. Next up, Lincoln Legends. Listen, the city of Lincoln Legends was in upheaval about the rankings last week. They didn't like it. We got the most feedback from that city. As the committee has said, guys, they just don't have enough. If you're projecting forward, they've just been decimated by injury. Could they make the playoffs? Yes. Could they pull an upset? Maybe if you squint hard enough. But it's just not enough there to win 3 straight playoff games. And honestly, he's probably closer to not having enough than to being a wild card. Last team on this list, Arizona Ron. And that's up to this point, honestly, the most disappointing team so far this season. had high hopes, and it's looking like for a second straight year, this team will not make the playoffs. Basically, the playoffs start for Ron this week. Good luck in the playoffs, Ron. And if I didn't mention you, you know why. There it is. Power rankings. Once again, I had a blast with this week's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Without that, let's set up for the game of the week. The only two 5-5 teams that are playing each other, whooping that ass, the North remembers. This game is going to go a long way into settling tiebreakers and see who moves up in the standings. I can't wait to talk about the game next week in the Boom Room.